My name is Ramon Herrera. I am 75 years old. My own son abandoned me on the street so that his wife's family could move into the house I built with blood, sweat and tears over the course of 4 decades. But he never imagined that his useless father had a secret that would ruin his life. Listen carefully, because this story will change your perspective on family forever. It all started on a grey Wednesday in October when my son Roberto came to my house with his wife Silvia and dropped the bomb that would destroy my world completely. "Dad, we need to talk about something important," he said in the same voice he used as a teenager when he had messed up big time. "Silvia's parents lost their house because of debt and they urgently need a place to stay. This house is too big for you alone. We think you should move into a retirement home where you'll be better cared for, as if I were terminally ill and needed special care. I built that house with my own hands over the course of 42 years, working as a mechanic from 5 in the morning until 9 at night. Every brick, every window, and every door in that house bore the mark of my sweat and dreams of providing my family with a decent home. Now my own son was talking to me as if I were a tenant whose lease had expired. "Roberto," I said, trying to stay calm, "this is my house. It's the house where you grew up, where your mother died, and where all my memories are." "Dad, don't be dramatic," Silvia replied, giving me that fake smile she had perfected during her 15 years of marriage to my son. "At the nursing home you'll have activities, you'll make friends, you'll have company. Here, you spend all day alone." Alone. Of course I was alone. They had stopped visiting me more than 2 years ago. But what neither of them knew, what they were about to discover in the most painful way possible, was that this old mechanic, whom they considered a burden, had been preparing something that would change the course of this story forever. It's one thing to be underestimated out of ignorance. It's quite another to be underestimated because people believe you have no options. Roberto was about to learn that difference in the most brutal way possible. Keep listening until the end, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Tell me which country you're listening from, because this story needs to be heard everywhere. To understand what was going on, I must tell you how we got to this point. I wasn't always the grandfather his family wanted to hide away in a nursing home as if I were a disgrace. I arrived in this city in 1975, newly married to Elena. May God rest her soul. We came from a small rural town where there was no work. We had nothing but a borrowed suitcase and the promise that, if we worked hard, we could give our children a better future than we had. I got a job at a neighborhood mechanic's shop. I was the handyman who cleaned, brought coffee and ran errands. But I watched the experienced mechanic's every move, asked questions, learned and stayed after hours to practice. Elena washed other people's clothes and looked after neighborhood children to supplement the family budget. On weekends I repaired bicycles and appliances in the yard of the 2-room shack we rented that flooded every time it rained hard. By the time Roberto was born, I had learned enough to become a certified mechanic. But I had bigger dreams. I wanted my own workshop, my own house, and a solid future for my family. For 5 years I saved every penny I could. I didn't buy new clothes. We didn't eat out or indulge. Every penny had a purpose, buying this land where I would build our dream home. I remember the day I signed the deed. While I calculated how many bricks, bags of cement and meters of pipe I would need, Elena cried with emotion. After working in the workshop all week, I would come here on Saturdays and Sundays with Roberto in my arms and start digging the foundations. Elena would bring me mate in a thermos and sit on a wooden box, watching me raise the walls of our future home. "Ramen," Elena would say as I mixed mortar, "this boy is going to have the prettiest house in the neighborhood." Roberto grew up seeing all that sacrifice. When he was 5, he helped me by handing me screws and small tools. "Dad, when will the house be ready?" he would ask with those bright, dreamy eyes kids have. "When you grow up, son, all this will be yours," I would reply, lifting him onto my shoulders as we looked at what we were building together. I gave him the best education I could afford. While I continued fixing engines with my hands, he studied engineering at the most expensive private university in the city. Each tuition payment meant 2 weeks of eating rice and noodles, but I did so without complaint. When he graduated, I threw a party that lasted until 3 in the morning. I invited the whole neighborhood, my co-workers from the shop, and Elena's family. I was so proud that I couldn't stop telling anyone who would listen that my son was an engineer. Look what this boy has achieved, I told everyone. He came from a family of workers, and now he's a university graduate. Elena died when Roberto was 28. She died suddenly from a heart attack in 2 days. Those were the darkest months of my life. I worked during the day and took care of her at night. I took her to doctors who charged a fortune to tell us there was nothing they could do. Roberto helped with the funeral expenses, but the one who stayed up all night, holding her hand as she slipped away, was the same old man whom they now wanted to send to a nursing home. After the funeral, Roberto moved into an apartment downtown. "Dad, I need to move out," he explained, and I understood. It was only natural for a young man to want to make his own life. The house was empty and silent, but Roberto still came over on Sundays for lunch. He told me about his job at the construction company, his projects and his plans. When he met Sylvia, he brought her over to meet me. She was a pretty well-educated girl from a wealthy family. From the first day, however, I noticed something in the way she looked at me, as if she were assessing whether I was an obstacle to her plans for Roberto. They had an elegant wedding that cost more than I earned in 6 months. I contributed what I could by selling some tools from my personal workshop. When my grandchildren Sophia and Tom's were born, I thought that my house would be filled with family life again. But little by little, the visits became less frequent. First, they stopped coming every Sunday, then every 2 weeks, then once a month, until they practically disappeared from my life. But here's what Roberto never knew, what he was about to discover when it was too late. While he believed his father was just a retired mechanic living on a meager pension, I was making decisions he thought were impossible for someone like me. Remember, I told you that I had worked as a mechanic all my life? Well, in all those years I learned something fundamental. Money isn't earned just by working hard. It's earned by working smart. Although I didn't have a college education like my son, I had something he lacked: business acumen and the patience to wait for the right moment. 15 years ago, while I was still working in the shop, I overheard 2 engineers discussing a project. They were discussing a large-scale government project, the construction of an industrial park on the outskirts of town. They mentioned land, strategic locations, and access roads that were going to be built. This information meant nothing to most people, but to someone who had seen a city grow over decades, it meant opportunity. For months I investigated discreetly. I walked around abandoned-looking areas, asked about prices, and studied maps at City Hall. I discovered several huge plots of land in the area where the industrial park was going to be built. No one wanted the land because it was in the middle of nowhere with no services or access. It seemed useless. For 3 years I saved every extra peso I earned from repairing private cars on weekends. Elena thought I had become obsessed with saving, but I told her, "Trust me, woman, this is for Roberto's future." Once I had enough money, I bought 4 of the plots. Elena said I had been swindled and thrown my money away. The neighbors mocked me. Raman bought himself a desert, they said, but I knew what I was doing. I kept the title deeds in a safe that I installed behind a closet in my room, and I waited. Year after year, as the government project slowly moved forward, I continued to save. I deposited every peso left over from family expenses and every extra I earned on weekend jobs in a special account I opened at a downtown bank. Elena didn't even know about the account. It wasn't because I was hiding things from her. I wanted to surprise her when all this came to fruition, but Elena died before I could tell her that her husband had been smarter than she ever imagined. Not being able to share with her the pride of having seen the future before anyone else was one of the deepest sorrows of my life. When Roberto graduated as an engineer, I was tempted to tell him everything. But then I thought, No, I'd better wait until he gets married and has children. Then I'll give him everything as an advance inheritance. How wrong I was. 8 years ago, the land began to appreciate when they officially announced the industrial park. The land that I had bought for pennies was now worth fortunes beyond my wildest dreams. Developers called me constantly, offering me astronomical sums, but I kept waiting for the perfect moment to share that joy with Roberto. I thought, when he finds out that I wasn't as simple as he thought, he'll be proud. He'll understand that all the sacrifice was worth it. 6 months ago, an international corporation made me an offer that almost gave me a heart attack. They wanted to buy the 4 plots of land for a sum that would make me a multimillionaire. Multimillionaire, can you believe it? Me, Ramon Herrera, the mechanic who arrived from the countryside penniless, could become a multimillionaire. But I kept waiting. I thought it would be better to save the surprise for when Roberto really needed it, or after I was gone and he found the papers among my belongings. I never thought I would use that fortune like this. I never imagined my son would kick me out of my home and make me move in with his in-laws. I never thought I would have to use my wealth not to make my family happy, but to teach them a lesson they would never forget. That night, after Roberto told me to go to the nursing home, I opened the safe and looked at the property deeds for the first time in months. I looked at the bank statements and the purchase offers that kept coming in. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel proud of what I had achieved. I felt deep sadness because all the money I had saved for my family's well-being would now have to be used for something completely different. If you were in my position, how would you react to this information? The deterioration of my relationship with Roberto didn't happen overnight. It was like the cracks in a wall that you don't notice at first, but that grow bigger over time until the house falls down on you one day. Everything changed when Roberto married Sylvia. At first, the signs were subtle. When they came over for Sunday lunch, Sylvia would find a reason to cut the visit short. "Oh, Ramon, we have to go because I have to get things ready for tomorrow," she would say, smiling, but the smile never reached her eyes. "Or the kids are tired, we'd better take them to bed." I tried to be an understanding father-in-law. I knew that not all daughters-in-law easily adapt to their in-laws, and I thought that with patience we would find a way to get along. But Sylvia had a special ability to make me feel invisible in my own home. When I spoke, she looked at her phone. When I told stories about when Roberto was a child, she would yawn or change the subject. The worst was when my grandchildren had birthdays. I bought them gifts that I had chosen with love, toys that I had seen in shop windows and imagined them enjoying, and storybooks that I planned to read to them during their visits. But Sylvia always had some hurtful comment. "Oh, Ramon, you shouldn't have bothered," she would say, as if my gifts were a burden instead of tokens of love. Once for Sophia's birthday, I built her a dollhouse by hand. I spent weeks in my little garage workshop, sanding, painting, and perfecting every detail. When I gave it to her, the little girl was overjoyed. But Sylvia said, "Oh, sweetheart, that toy is so old-fashioned. Let's play with the new things your other grandparents bought you. Outdated." Those words hurt me more than a hammer blow to the thumb. Roberto, who used to defend me when his wife made those comments, started to keep quiet. Even worse, he started to agree with her. "Dad, don't bother making things. We already have everything the kids need," he would tell me, treating my lovingly made gifts like a nuisance. Sundays became dramatically shorter. They arrived after noon, ate quickly, and left before 3. I cooked for an army because I loved taking care of my family, but there was always leftover food. "Ramon, don't cook so much. We eat light," Sylvia would say, but I knew she was lying. The kids ate perfectly well. She was the one in a hurry to leave. Then the constant cancellations began. "Dad, we can't come this Sunday. Sylvia has a migraine." "Dad, the kids have the flu. We'd better stay home." "Dad, we have a family event on Sylvia's side." There was always an excuse. During the week, I would call Roberto to confirm if they were coming. He would reply, "Dad, we're very busy, we'll let you know when we can. But the weeks went by, and the call never came. One day, I decided to visit them myself. It was the biggest mistake I could have made. When I rang the doorbell, Sylvia opened the door with an expression that I can't describe. "Oh Raman, what a surprise," she said. It was clearly not a pleasant surprise though. Roberto had left for work early. It was Sunday afternoon, and the kids were playing in the yard. When they saw me, they shouted, "Grandpa," and dared to hug me. But Sylvia immediately called them back. "Kids, come inside. It's cold." It was the middle of summer, and it was 30 degrees outside. I stood at the door like a street vendor. Sylvia didn't invite me in or offer me a glass of water. "Well, Ram, when Roberto gets home, I'll tell him you came," she said, closing the door. I walked to the bus stop, feeling like a kicked dog. That day I realized that to Sylvia, I was not her husband's father. I was a nuisance, an old man who bothered her. But what hurt me the most was that Roberto never asked why I came to visit. He never called to apologize for his wife's behavior. He simply acted as if nothing had happened. The Christmas holidays became a formality. They would come for an hour, eat something, and then the kids would open their presents. Then they would leave. "We have to go to dinner with Sylvia's family," was their usual excuse. They never invited me to meet that other family. They never included me in their important plans. When I turned 73, I waited all afternoon for them to come say hello. I had baked a cake, bought drinks, and cleaned the house from top to bottom. At 9 o'clock that night, Roberto called me. "Dad, happy birthday. Sorry we couldn't make it, but something came up." He didn't explain what the unexpected thing was. He didn't give me any details. I ate cake alone that night, looking at photos of when Roberto was a boy and helped me fix engines in the workshop. I wondered where I had failed as a father. What had I done wrong to make my son treat me like a stranger? Now, 2 years later, that same son who couldn't spend an afternoon with me and who didn't have time to visit me was telling me that I had to leave my home so his in-laws could live there. The same in-laws he prioritized over his own father. But, as I said at the beginning, there were things Roberto didn't know. I had kept these things to myself, not out of malice, but because I never thought I would need them to defend myself against my own son. Those things were about to change the whole story irreversibly. Now comes the part my son never imagined. While he thought I was just a retired mechanic living on a meager pension, I had been taking actions that he thought were impossible for someone in my position. I made the first call at 7 in the morning the day after that devastating conversation. I called the development company that had been pressuring me for months to sell the land. "Good morning. This is Ramna Herrera. Do you remember the $1 million offer you made me for the land in the industrial sector? I accept it, but on one condition: I want the deal closed by Friday." On the other end of the line, they almost fell off their chairs. "Mr. Herrera, it's impossible to close a transaction of that magnitude in such a short time. There's a lot of paperwork and signatures required. We need at least 30 days. Listen to me carefully," I said with an authority I didn't know I possessed. "You've been insisting for a year and a half that I sell you this land. If you really need it, you have 4 days. If not, I'll call the competition." It worked. 3 hours later, they called me back to confirm that they could expedite the process. The second call was to the bank, where I had my secret savings account. "I want to transfer all the money to a new account at another institution," I told them. The employee asked if I was sure and if I didn't prefer to keep it invested. "Young man," I replied, "I'm 75 years old, and I know exactly what I'm doing." The third call was the most important of all. I called attorney Martinez, a professional I knew from the neighborhood who had handled several real estate transactions for people from the workshop. "Mr. Martinez, I need your help with a delicate family matter." I explained the whole situation to him. I told him how my son was kicking me out of my own home because he thought I was an elderly man with no resources and had decided to move his in-laws into my place. The lawyer listened to me in complete silence. "Don Ramna," he said when I finished, "legally your son cannot evict you from your home without your consent. That property is in your name." "I know that, sir, but I don't want to take him to court. I want something different. I want to teach him a lesson he'll never forget." I told him about the land, the money I had accumulated, and my plans. The lawyer whistled softly. "Don Ramna, you are not the helpless old man you appear to be." "No, sir, I'm not. I want my son to find that out in the most shocking way possible." I spent that week acting as if nothing out of the ordinary were happening. Roberto continued to show up every day with his family and in-laws. They continued to shower me with false attention. They planned my future as if I had no say in the matter. One day, I overheard Sylvia talking on the phone. "Yes, we've almost solved the house problem. The old man is leaving for the nursing home next Monday. You have no idea how nice it's going to look after we renovate." Renovations in the house that I had built with my own hands, the house where I had lived for over 40 years. They're treating it like an abandoned property in need of modernization. Roberto showed me brochures for the nursing home. "Look, Dad, how beautiful it is. They have specialized nurses, recreational activities, and even an entertainment room." He spoke as if he were offering me a vacation at a 5-star resort. "And how much does it cost?" I asked him. "Don't worry about that, Dad. With your pension and a small contribution from us, it'll be covered." A small contribution from them. How generous. They were kicking me out of my house to make room for their in-laws. On top of that, they were offering to contribute financially to my confinement. On Thursday, with one day to go before the land sale was finalized, Roberto showed up with a giant suitcase. "Dad, I brought this so you can start organizing your belongings. I thought you might need help deciding what to take and what to leave." "What to leave?" I asked him. "Well, Dad, you won't have much space in the nursing home. You can take your clothes, some personal mementos, and Mom's photos, but you can leave the furniture and appliances here. We'll take care of them." "Of course," he said. They were going to take care of my furniture. It was the furniture I had bought by working 12-hour days for decades. They were going to take care of it so their in-laws could use it. That night, for the first time in a week, I allowed myself to genuinely smile. To really smile. My son had no idea about the storm that was coming. Friday was the most intense day of my life. That morning, I went to the notary and confirmed that all the money from the sale had been deposited. It was a sum I had never imagined possessing, not even in my wildest dreams. It turned this old mechanic into an extraordinarily wealthy man. In the afternoon, Roberto arrived with Sylvia and the kids. "Well, Dad, tomorrow is the big day. Everything has been arranged at the nursing home. They're expecting you at 10 in the morning." The kids hugged me. "Grandpa, we're going to miss you so much," said Sofa, tears in her eyes. I knew it was completely true. The only ones who were really going to miss me were them. "Don't worry," I told them. "Grandpa's not going very far." Roberto smiled. "Exactly, Dad. We'll visit you every weekend." Every weekend, just like they had been doing for the past 2 years. That night I packed a small suitcase with the bare essentials, but not for the nursing home. I had other plans that my son would discover very soon. Before going to bed, I walked through every corner of the house one last time. It was the house I had built with love while dreaming of my family's future. Now my own son was kicking me out of it to make room for strangers. Saturday was going to be a day none of us would ever forget. I woke up before dawn on Saturday morning. It wasn't because I was anxious. I had a lot to take care of before Roberto came to pick me up and take me to the supposed nursing home. At 7 o'clock sharp I called Dr. Martinez. "Doctor, today is the day. Is everything ready? Don Raman, all the documents are signed and the transfers are processed. All that's left is for you to give the final order. Perfect. At 11 a.m., I want you to send the papers. Then I called my sister Carmen, who lives in the capital. We hadn't spoken in months since the last family reunion that Roberto didn't take me to. Carmen, it's Raman. I need to ask you a huge favor. Can I stay at your house for a few days? I'll explain everything when I get there, but it's urgent. My sister, who had always been intuitive, didn't ask any unnecessary questions. Brother, this house is yours. Come whenever you want. At 8:30 the doorbell rang. It was Roberto accompanied by Sylvia and the kids who had come to support me during this special moment. How thoughtful. Good morning, Dad. Are you ready? Yes, son, everything is ready. I looked at my grandchildren and my heart broke. They weren't to blame for anything. They were victims of their parents' ambition and insensitivity. Kids, I said, Grandpa loves you very much. Always remember that no matter what happens. Roberto smiled. Dad, don't act like the world is ending. The nursing home is only 15 minutes away. At 10 o'clock sharp, my in-laws arrived with a moving truck. Don Ernesto directed the workers as if he had owned the house forever. Be careful with that sofa. Put that table near the window, he ordered. My dad hasn't moved out yet, Roberto told the workers, but you can start arranging things. He watched them from the armchair where I had spent so many afternoons reading the newspaper, where I had comforted Roberto when he had nightmares as a child, and where I had spent time with Elena during her last days. Well, Dad, Roberto said to me at exactly 10:30, it's time to go. Yes, son, it's time. I picked up my small suitcase and walked toward the door. In the doorway, I turned to look at the house one last time. My in-laws were setting up their belongings in my living room. Doa Marta was hanging an ugly painting on the wall where Elena's photo had once hung. Goodbye, house, I whispered. On the way to the nursing home, Roberto was more talkative than he had been in years. Dad, you're going to love it. They have lots of activities. The food is excellent, and the other residents are very friendly. The other residents, as if I were just another face in the crowd. We arrived at the nursing home at 11:05. It was a gray building with tiny windows and a neglected garden. It was nothing like the photos in the brochures Roberto had shown me. Well, Dad, here we are. Yes, son, here we are. I got out of the car with my suitcase. Roberto was parking when my phone rang. It was exactly 11:10. Don Raman, this is Dr. Martinez. I sent all the documents you requested. They'll be at your house in 15 minutes. Perfect, doctor. Thank you very much. I hung up and looked at Roberto, who was approaching with a smile on his face. It was a smile that would soon fade. Everything okay, Dad? Who were you talking to? No one important, son. Let's go in. We entered the nursing home. The place smelled of disinfectant and reheated food. A nurse greeted us with a folder full of forms. You must be Mr. Herrera. Welcome. Your son already told us about your situation. My situation? It was as if it were a medical file. While the nurse explained the visiting hours and the institution's rules to Roberto, I took out my phone and sent a message I had been preparing for days. It was for all my neighbors, my former co-workers at the workshop, everyone I knew in the neighborhood. The message read, "Today my son had me admitted to a nursing home so that his in-laws could live in my house. But he doesn't know that I'm a multi-millionaire. In 10 minutes, he'll find out. Please keep an eye on your phones." I put my phone away and looked at my son, who was still talking to the nurse about medications and special care. "Roberto," I said. "Yes, Dad. There's something I have to tell you." He came over to me, wearing the same feigned look of concern he'd had all week. "What's wrong, Dad? Are you feeling sick?" "No, son. I feel perfectly fine. It's just that there are some things you don't know about your old man." "What things, Dad?" I looked at my watch. 11:20. In 5 minutes, the courier would arrive at our house with the documents that would change everything forever. Do you think I'm a poor old man who has no choice but to live off my son's charity? Dad, it's not charity. It's family love. Family love. Roberto, you haven't come to my house in 2 years, except to ask me for something or make excuses. For 2 years your children have gotten to know their other grandparents better than they've gotten to know me. And now you're telling me that you're kicking me out of my own home because of family love. Dad, it's not like that. Let me finish, son. There's something you need to know. At that moment, my phone rang. It was exactly 11:25. Don Ramon, the documents have been delivered. Your son should have them by now. I hung up and looked at Roberto. Son, you just received some papers at home. I recommend you go check them out immediately. He looked at me with the same confused expression he had as a child when he didn't understand instructions. What papers, Dad? I don't understand. Go home, son. Go read the documents the courier just delivered. When you've read them, come back here if you want to talk to me. Dad, you're scaring me. What are you talking about? The nurse looked at us, confused. Excuse me, is there a problem? No, I replied. There's no problem, but my son has to go home urgently. Roberto took out his phone and called Sylvia. Honey, did a courier come to the house? Did they deliver any documents for me? I could hear Sylvia talking rapidly and upset on the other end. Roberto turned completely pale. What do the papers say? Did you read them? Pause. No. Don't open them. Wait for me. I'm on my way. He hung up and looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. Dad, what did you do? What I had to do, son, what I should have done a long time ago. He ran off without saying goodbye. I stayed at the nursing home, sitting in a plastic chair in the lobby, waiting. A nurse asked if I wanted to see the room they had assigned to me. No, ma'am, not yet. I'm waiting for my son to come back. An hour passed, then another. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone started ringing non-stop. First, my neighbor across the street called. Ram, what the hell is going on at your house? Your son just arrived screaming like a madman, and your in-laws are taking all your things out of the truck again. Then my friend Luis, who lived on the corner, called me. Ram, my wife told me she saw your daughter-in-law crying on the sidewalk. Is it true that you were kicked out of your house? Then the owner of the neighborhood store called me. Don Ram, are you okay? There's a huge commotion here. The whole neighborhood is talking about what happened. At 2:30 in the afternoon, Roberto arrived at the nursing home alone. He came alone, without Sylvia or the kids. His face looked distraught, as if he had seen a ghost. He sat down next to me in silence. He took the documents that the lawyer had sent him out of a folder and placed them on the small table in front of us. Dad, he said in a voice I had never heard before, is all this true? The papers were very clear. The first was a copy of the title deeds for the 4 plots of land he had bought 15 years ago. The second was the sales contract he had signed that week. The third was a bank deposit slip showing how much money I had in my new account. Yes, son. It's all true. Dad, what about these plots of land? Does this mean that you are? Yes, Roberto. Your poor useless old man whom you just put in a nursing home is a multi-millionaire. He was silent for a long time, staring at the papers as if they were written in a foreign language. Dad, I didn't know. Of course you didn't know, because you never cared to find out. In all these years, have you ever asked me how I was doing financially? Did you ever bother to find out if I needed anything? Have you ever thought that maybe your old man had more resources than you imagined? But Dad, why didn't you ever tell me? Because I wanted to save it for you as an inheritance, Roberto. I wanted you to open the safe after I died and find all this as a surprise. I wanted you to say, my old man was smarter than I thought. His eyes filled with tears. But now, I continued, after what you did to me, everything has changed. What do you mean? I took another piece of paper out of my pocket. It was a donation form that I had signed with Dr. Martinez. This document states that 70% of my fortune will go to charity, nursing homes, soup kitchens and shelters for the homeless, people who really need help. What about the other 30%? The remaining 30% is going to my grandchildren, but it will be held in a trust fund that they won't be able to access until they turn 25. There's one condition though. They must visit their grandfather at least once a month until he dies. Roberto covered his face with his hands. And what's left for me? For you, son, there's what you chose to leave. You have the pride of kicking your father out of his own home. You have the satisfaction of putting your in-laws in the place where I lived for 40 years. There's the peace of mind that comes with knowing you did the right thing. Dad, I can change all this. I can get your in-laws out and you can come back home. No, Roberto, you can't change anything. What you did can't be erased by regret. What you did showed me who you really are. You're not the son I thought I raised. He stood there crying silently. For the first time in years I saw him cry like he did when he was a kid and fell off his bike. Dad, I'm sorry I didn't know. The problem, son, is not that you didn't know I had money. The problem is that you didn't know I had feelings. After that conversation at the nursing home, I didn't see Roberto for 4 months, but I found out everything that was going on through the neighbors, who called me with every detail. I went to live with my sister Carmen in the capital. At her house for the first time in years I felt like a person and not a burden. Carmen made me breakfast every morning. She asked me how I slept. She included me in conversations when her children came to visit. Raman, she would say, I don't understand how your son could do that to you, but I'm glad you made the decision you did. I bought a small but cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood in the capital with part of the money from the sale. It had a beautiful view of a plaza where I went for walks every morning. For the first time in decades, I woke up without back pain or the tightness in my chest I had experienced for years. I started doing things I had never had time for before. I signed up for a carpentry workshop for seniors. There, I met Don Alberto, a former electrician who had experienced something similar with his family. We became friends and would drink mate in the square and play cards at the senior center together. Blood family isn't always the family of the heart, Don Alberto would tell me. Sometimes you have to build your own tribe. I also started volunteering at a community soup kitchen. I helped serve food and played with the children. Those kids who had almost nothing showed me more affection than my own son had in years. One day, one of the other volunteers at the kitchen said to me, Don Raman, you have a special energy. The kids adore you. I thought it was strange that strangers could see this energy that my own family had stopped noticing so long ago. Meanwhile, I found out everything that was going on in my old house from the neighbors. My in-laws had lasted barely 3 weeks. It turned out that Don Ernesto and Doa Marta didn't get along with Silvia at all. The arguments, recriminations and fights over the television, food and bathroom began. Your daughter-in-law is desperate, my compadre Luis told me on the phone. She says her in-laws criticize her all day long and won't let her live in peace. But the most ironic part came later. The in-laws who had sold their apartment thinking they were going to stay at my house forever found themselves homeless when the situation became unbearable. They had to rent a tiny apartment with the little money they had left from the sale. Roberto had calculated that, with my retirement and a small contribution from him, he could pay for the nursing home. But he found himself having to finance everything on his own. Obviously, I was not in a nursing home. Your son is desperate, the neighborhood grocer told me. He came to ask me if I knew where you were. I told him I had no idea. The neighbors told me that Silvia blamed Roberto for everything that had happened. If you had known your father had money, we would never have gone through this humiliation. She yelled at him in the courtyard, making sure the whole neighborhood could hear. Money, we always came back to money. It wasn't that she felt bad about kicking me out of the house. She felt bad about losing the inheritance. One day Don Alberto said something to me that left a deep impression. Raman, the sweetest revenge is not to hurt those who hurt you. The sweetest revenge is to live well despite what they did to you. And he was right. I was living better than ever. I got up whenever I wanted. I ate whatever I wanted. I went wherever I wanted. No one treated me like a burden. No one sighed when they saw me coming. No one calculated how much it cost to support me. In the community dining room, I met Esperanza, a 68-year-old widow who volunteered. She was intelligent with a beautiful smile and a tender way of treating children. Don Raman, she said to me one day after I told the kids a story, "You must have been a wonderful father." I thought so, I replied, but it seems I was wrong. Children sometimes make mistakes, Esperanza said. But that doesn't mean you were a bad father. We started having coffee after our volunteer work. She told me about her children, who lived in the countryside and visited her regularly. I told her my story, and she listened without judging me or offering advice I hadn't asked for. "Don't you miss your son?" she asked one day. "I miss the son I thought I had," I replied. "The son who helped me in the workshop when he was a kid. The son who cried in my arms when he got hurt. But I don't miss the man who kicked me out of my house to make room for his in-laws." At night in my new apartment, I sometimes thought about my grandchildren. They did hurt me. They didn't choose to have parents like that. They weren't to blame for anything. I had made a decision though, and I was going to stick to it. The trust I set up for them would ensure their financial security. The condition that they visit me once a month would teach them something their parents never did, that grandparents are treasures, not burdens. 8 months after leaving home, I had already established a new routine, new friends, a new life. It was a life where I was Ramon Herrera, not Roberto's dad. It was a life where people valued me for who I was, not what I could offer them. The most beautiful thing of all was that I had discovered you could be happy at 75, that you could start over. It's never too late to choose who deserves to be in your life. It's been a year and a half since my son kicked me out of the house. A year and a half since he found out that his useless old man was a multimillionaire. It's been a year and a half since I've had to rebuild my life at 75. And you know what? It's been the most fulfilling period I've had in a long time. 6 months ago, Esperanza and I had a civil wedding. It was an intimate ceremony with Don Alberto as our witness and a few friends from the community dining hall. Nothing ostentatious, nothing complicated. Just two people who decided to accompany each other through this stage of life. Through Esperanza, I gained a new family. Her children welcomed me as if I were their father. My mother is happier than ever. Her eldest son tells me, "Thank you for taking care of her." Taking care of her. What a beautiful phrase. How different it sounds from supporting her or putting up with her. The community dining hall where we volunteer now has my name on a plaque, Rincan Ramon Herrera, where every child finds a grandfather. With part of my fortune, we buy snacks for 300 children throughout the year. Those kids know me as Grandpa Ramon. When they see me coming, they shout my name and run to hug me. How funny. I have more grandchildren in that dining hall than I did with my own children. 3 weeks ago, Santiago, an 8-year-old boy from the dining hall, said something to me that touched my soul. "Grandpa Ramon, when I grow up I'm going to take care of my parents like you take care of us." That's when I understood everything. My true legacy wasn't the land I sold or the money I accumulated over the years. It was the values I could pass on, and it turns out I was passing those values on to kids who really appreciated them. And Roberto? He has called me 6 times in the last year and a half. The first 5 calls were to ask if we could talk like adults about the inheritance. The 6th call was to tell me that Sylvia had left him. "Dad," he said on that last call, "Sylvia left with the kids to go to her parents' house. She says she can't be married to someone who lost a fortune out of pride." Out of pride. How interesting. She thought I donated my money out of pride. She didn't understand that I had done it out of dignity. And what are you going to do? I asked him. I don't know, Dad. I'm alone in the house that used to be yours. I'm surrounded by memories, but I have no money to maintain the house, and I have no family. Well, son, I said, now you know how it feels. A month ago I received a letter from my grandchildren. They wrote it themselves without help from their parents. It said, Grandpa, we were told that you went far away, but we love you and want to see you. Can we come visit you? Sofa, who is now 14, wrote that letter. At the end was a drawing by Tom's. It was a drawing of a man with a cane standing next to a house. Underneath it said, I love you, Grandpa. I called them that same night. I talked to them for 2 hours. I explained to them in words they could understand why Grandpa had to leave. I told them that, when they were older and wanted to, they could visit me. Grandpa, is it true that you're rich? Tom's asked me. Yes, my love, it's true. Then why don't you give us money? Because there's something more important than money, and I'll give it to you when you're older and can understand. What are you going to give us? I'm going to give you an example. You don't have to put up with being treated badly just because they're family. You can start over at any age. An example that dignity is not negotiable. The other day, while walking through the square with Esperanza, she asked me, Ramon, don't you regret anything you did? Do you know what I regret? I replied, I regret waiting so long to value myself. I regret putting up with years of contempt, thinking it was normal. I regret not setting boundaries sooner. And don't you miss your son? I miss the son I could have had if I had taught him what respect means. But I don't miss the man who kicked me out of my own home. In 3 months I'll turn 77. Esperanza and I are planning a trip to Bariloche. It will be the first time in my life that I travel for pleasure, not work. Last week, Don Alberto told me, Ramon, you look 10 years younger than when I first met you. And he's right. Freeing yourself from people who hurt you, even if they're family, rejuvenates you. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had told Roberto about the land before he kicked me out. But then I think maybe it was better this way. Maybe I needed to go through all this to discover what I was really made of. Here I am at 76. I'm married to a woman who loves me. I'm surrounded by friends who respect me. I'm helping kids who see me as a hero. And I'm living in a place where I'm happy. I'm living in a place where I'm happy. I lost a family, yes, but I gained a life. Also, thank you for listening to me this far. You who have accompanied me on this journey, I want you to know something fundamental. No matter who it is, if someone mistreats you, disrespects you, or makes you feel like a nuisance, it's not okay. It doesn't matter if they're your child, father, brother, or partner. No one, and I mean no one, has the right to hurt you just because they can. Life is too short to waste on people who don't value you. It's never too late to start over. I lost a son, but I found a family. I lost a house, but I gained a home. I lost money, but I gained peace. So what would you choose? Would you put up with abuse for fear of being alone, or risk being happy? Let me know if this story resonated with you, and tell me which country you're listening from. In the end, the only thing that matters isn't how much money you have in the bank. It's how much true love you have in your life. Sometimes you have to look for love in unexpected places.